Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Georgia National Guard Fencepost podcast. I'm your host, Tiffany Irene Coulibaly, and today I have the pleasure of continuing the conversation with the Georgia State Defense Force. We have the Commanding General, Brigadier General Mark Gelhardt, here with us today. And first off, I want to say thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to this discussion.
I am too. We learned a lot from Clark Howard on the first part of the podcast, and so I'm very interested to hear your perspective. So let's jump right in. Can you give us from your perspective, who is the Georgia State Defense Force?
The Georgia State Defense Force is your volunteer firefighting organization for the state. Usually small little towns and communities don't have the professional firefighters they need to support the emergency services within their area. So they have volunteers that come and train and help the citizens. The Georgia State Defense Force is exactly the same way. We are citizen individuals, volunteers that are professionally trained to provide emergency services to the state of Georgia when asked for by the governor or state EMA, emergency management agencies, or any other organization that needs specific emergency help. We bring a total plethora, a large group of folks with a large group of talents. We can do search and rescue. We can do food banks. We did more than 9,000 volunteer free hours during COVID. And most recently, we were dispatched to Spalding County and Griffin, Georgia, in support of the tornado operations they had there. So we're all volunteer. We have about 1/3 that are retired military, like myself. We have 1/3 of us that are prior service military that didn't spend enough time to retire, but have that knowledge of the military. And about 1/3 and a growing third that are all volunteers that have never served in uniform. We will train them on how to put on a uniform. We will train them on how to salute, what rank structures are, and we will train them on the skills they'll need to help their citizens, their neighbors, during disasters and during other events.
So leading into that, as you were talking about what you all do, how do you assist the National Guard? Kind of like the example you were giving about COVID and the recent storms in Griffin. How do you all assist the National Guard?
Well, we are the brother, the sister, the stepbrother, whatever you want to call, of the National Guard. We are side by side to the National Guard. My boss is the TAG, the Adjutant General. His boss is the governor. We wear uniforms just like the National Guard. We wear some portions of our uniform different because we are a volunteer force, not a federal force. But we work with the National Guard as one of our 3 primary missions. Our first primary mission is to support the National Guard when they deploy, when they need help in training, when they need opposing force individuals, when they need someone to cover down on their armories, when they need help and assistance in anything. We are there to help the National Guard. That's one of our primary missions. A secondary mission is to help during emergencies and disasters like the one I just mentioned in Griffin. And the third triad of our mission is to help local citizens in public relations, parades, funerals. But we're hand in hand with the National Guard. We couldn't do what we do without the National Guard, and we give the National Guard some assets and abilities that they wouldn't have otherwise. The National Guard, when deployed for emergency operations, usually takes about 72 hours to deploy to an emergency site. That's time to get the emergency declaration from the governor, time to get emergency declaration from the president, from FEMA. All that takes time. So a Minuteman, that National Guard Minuteman, takes a little bit more than a minute to get to its neighbors. This is where we help. The Georgia State Defense Force, The governor or the TAG can call me, and I can have someone on the ground within an hour. That's what helps the National Guard, because we will put a professionally trained, uniformed individual on site of an emergency within an hour, and we will hold down the fort for the next 72 hours until the National Guard can show up en masse. That's a hand-in-hand, brother and sister operation that allows our state to have a benefit of having military individuals in uniform on site from minute one until the end of the mission.
Can you paint a picture for us of how Griffin, how you all were mobilized during that situation and how that happened?
Spalding County EMA, Emergency Management Agency, called the state and said, we need a little help. There's a whole emergency management system, GEMA, Georgia Emergency Management Agency, and they have our number. They have our names and our abilities. And GEMA, when called, will take the mission that they get and look at the assets that are available in the state and hand out those missions to those assets. In this case, Spalding County said, we need some help. There's too many trees down. There's too much that we can do on our own, and we could use some help. That went to GEMA. GEMA asked the National Guard if they could help. And the National Guard, in this case, since it's not a national or statewide emergency, a tornado usually strikes one community. It doesn't hit the whole state. Sometimes it hits one city and it doesn't even affect the whole county. In these cases, there's not usually a federal or a statewide emergency declared. And even if it is, I told you it takes a little while for that money to get rolling. In this case, Spalding County asked for help. GEMA knew that the State Defense Force is who we are and what we do, and they asked us to provide support. Within the first call, I had 4 people on the ground within an hour. They did situational awareness. They did face-to-face contact with the people asking for help. By the next morning, I had 50 people on the ground. By the afternoon, we had chainsaw teams. We had reconnaissance teams to look at streams and dikes and bridges. And we helped the local community for the next 72 hours with approximately 50 people on the ground at no cost to the state, at no cost to the community, helping our neighbors hand in hand. That's what the Georgia State Defense Force does. It brings total volunteers to your neighborhood to help you when you need it.
I heard a lot of similarities to the National Guard and things like that. What would be the main differences, like as far as like time commitment? Are you under contracts? Like what's the main differences between the two?
In the State Defense Force, you will never deploy overseas to a combat area. That doesn't exist in our world. That's not what we're here for. We have individuals that don't want to go to combat, don't want to go to war. If you join the State Defense Force, you will not go to combat, you will not go to war. That is a primary difference. Our job and our mission in the State Defense Force is solely dedicated to the state of Georgia. Now, do we have opportunities maybe to go to our neighbor states during a flood or hurricane? Those opportunities might exist, but we haven't done those things yet. The need just hasn't been there. The difference between a National Guard soldier and a State Defense Force soldier is very minimal. The National Guard soldier, I have to admit, gets paid. We do not get paid. The National Guard soldier, however, when he gets an order is a legal document that they have to leave their work and go do what the National Guard tells them to do, or the military tells them to do. We are an all-volunteer force. Again, I'll go back to the analogy of a volunteer firefighter. If I'm sitting at home on the couch and my pager goes off because there's a fire, I'm probably going to go to the fire. If I'm in the middle of a movie with my wife and kids, or if I'm on vacation and the pager goes off, I'm probably not going to go to the fire. That's the State Defense Force. We're going to ask for volunteers to come to missions. And if you say, I can't go because I have work or the wife or the kids or the dog, we're going to be understandable. We have hundreds of people within our ranks. And when we asked for volunteers for Griffin, we got 40 to 50 people right away.
So then tell us, how can someone join? What are all the details for joining, and how can they reach out to you all?
Well, we have a phone number on our website. We have a website. We have a Facebook page. We have multimedia out there. If you Google Georgia State Defense Force, if you Google that, you will find us. And we have recruiters that will contact you and ask you questions, help answer any questions you might have. You will get no commitment and you will get no spam if you ask us a question, if you send us an email. We'll respond, give you information, and allow you to make your own decision. We have a 1-800 number that has just been published on our website. So, and frankly, my name's Brigadier General Mark Gelhardt. I am out there on the web all over the place. And if you can't find anybody else, contact me and I'll get you in contact with the right people. We just want you to come look at what we have to offer and see if it meets your needs. We need you. Come join us.
Yes, thank you so much for your time today. We had a great time getting to learn more about the Georgia State Defense Force. And I actually have your number right here. It's 1-833-715-4733. Again, it's 1-833-715-4733. So if you're interested in joining the Georgia State Defense Force, give them a call and they'll love to hear from you.
Thank you very much. We look forward to it.
And thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Georgia National Guard Fencepost podcast. You can catch us every first Friday of the month. You can find us on all your favorite podcast streaming platforms. I look forward to talking with you next month, and thanks again for tuning in.